Imagine a colleague who has spent the last hour staring at the same line of a spreadsheet, sighing and repeating the same frustrated hand gesture. Or think of a child mid-tantrum, seemingly unable to hear anything you say. Standard logical advice, like telling them to just calm down, often goes nowhere because the person isn't simply ignoring you. Their body is maintaining a fixed physical pattern that reinforces the emotion, trapping them in what NLP calls a stuck state. To reach them, you have to bypass the verbal argument entirely. We're going to use a technique called a pattern interrupt, a method designed to disrupt the brain's current sequence by introducing a sudden, unexpected change. This process requires no specialized equipment. It only requires sharp observation and the willingness to do something entirely out of character to break the loop. The first step is identification. To do this, ignore what the person is saying and focus purely on how they are holding themselves. You must look for a fixed physical posture. Usually, a person in a stuck state will sit or stand in the exact same spot, often for long periods, without shifting their weight or moving their limbs. Observe the subtle indicator shown here. In a negative loop, breathing becomes shallow and restricted, and the eye line almost always drops toward the floor. Notice the slumped silhouette on the left compared to the open, upright posture on the right. You should also listen for repetitive behavioral loops. They might use the same specific phrases or exhibit the same small, restless hand gestures over and over again. Because the mind and body function as one system, identifying these physical tells is a mandatory diagnostic step. You have to recognize the physical pattern before you can hope to change the mental one. Step number 2 is preparing the intervention. A pattern interrupt is defined by being abrupt and completely unrelated to the current problem. At this stage, your goal isn't to make the person feel better or find a solution. You are simply trying to shift them into a neutral state of mind. A brain in a stuck state is like a transmission jammed in reverse. The pattern interrupt presses the clutch, popping the shifter out of that negative gear. This drops it into the center, causing momentary confusion. This is the neutral state. This can be extreme. Richard Bandler, one of the creators of NLP, was known to tip a glass of water over a client just to shatter a particularly deep emotional loop. It is the sheer absurdity of the action that severs the neurological link. Logic cannot break a loop anchored in the body, but a sudden system shock can. In step 3, you execute the distraction. You have to commit to the unexpected. Auditory interrupts are often the easiest. You might tell a loud joke that has nothing to do with the situation, or call the person's name sharply to get their attention. Kinesthetic interrupts are even more effective. You can ask them to stand up or toss a small object like a marker for them to catch. If the interrupt works, they will look visibly confused or distracted for a moment. This confirms you have successfully hit that neutral gear. A common mistake is being too polite. If the interruption is subtle, their brain will simply incorporate it into the existing loop, and the negative state will remain intact. You must move immediately to step 4. If you stop once they are in neutral, they will likely slide right back into the original negative state. Since the mind and body reflect one another, you now need to guide their body into a position incompatible with the old state. Give them specific physical directions. Have them stand up straight, take a deep breath, and look toward the ceiling. Ask them to act as if they feel completely confident and resourceful. When you change the posture, you change the physiological baseline. By holding an upright, expansive position, the body stops providing the physical feedback that the old negative loop requires to stay active. By the end of this sequence, the intense emotional state has shifted. The person is now back at a neutral baseline, which allows them to actually hear and process what you're saying. Remember the 4-part sequence. Identify the fixed posture, prepare an abrupt distraction, execute the shock to reach neutral, and physically lead them into an upright position. Try applying these same observations to yourself. The next time you find your own thoughts spiraling, treat it as a physical pattern that needs a break. Emotional gridlock is often the product of a physical habit. With the pattern interrupt, you have a direct way to disrupt that loop and move toward a more useful state.